So this is from Taylor. Taylor says, "Hi, Nathan and Ben. I hope you're both doing well, and thanks for taking the time to read my message. I just got back from a 2-week hiking trip in Spain." Sounds awesome. "Right before the trip, I decided I was going to take the LSAT, so I downloaded a bunch of Thinking LSAT episodes and listened to them periodically as I hiked." I like to listen to podcasts when I hike, too. The day after I got back to the US, I took my first practice test and scored a 160. Overall, I'm fairly encouraged by this starting score, but I'm concerned about one aspect. Reading comp is by far my weakest section. My section scores were logical reasoning -2, logical reasoning -2, logic games -7, reading comprehension -14. I'm encouraged by my starting points in logical reasoning and logic games, but the reading comp score is really dragging me down. I've frequently seen it stated that reading comprehension is the most difficult section to improve. Some people say impossible, because I'm reliant on a skill that is developed over years of practice. So my questions are: 1. Is a considerable reading comprehension score improvement achievable in 3 months? 2. Do you often see your students improve drastically in reading comprehension? 3. How would you suggest a self-study student practice reading comprehension with 3 months before the test? What are the best reading comprehension resources? Maybe just leave it there and answer these questions.
Sure. So 1, is considerable RCA score improvement achievable in 3 months? Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I think so. What do you think?
Well, I would say especially in Taylor's case.
Okay.
Yeah. But based on her, her? Yeah, I'm going to say her. I don't know. Taylor could go either way, but I'm going to say her. Based on her profile on this one test, I feel like it's impossible to get -2 on 2 separate logical reasoning sections.
Yeah, that's really good.
And then that's really, really good. For a starting spot, that is really good. And I mean, geez, that's really good almost for a finishing spot, right? Like you could score 170 with that.
Yeah.
I feel like the huge discrepancy between logical reasoning and reading comprehension here indicates that she is an unusually strong candidate to dramatically improve her reading comprehension.
I agree. She can obviously read. She's not looking for the right things or something.
Yeah, that's my thought is like, well, you clearly are a good reader. You can't be a bad reader and get -2 on it. Any section of logical reasoning. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
So you are a good reader, but there's something about probably just not really understanding the questions in the reading comprehension.
I agree. And I think that that's especially true for Taylor, but I think it's also true for other people who are even scoring maybe lower in logical reasoning and in reading comp. Can you considerably improve your score in 3 months? Yes. It won't get to a point maybe where it's a super high score, but it could definitely improve and maybe improve significantly if you put the effort in.
Yeah. I'd say it's the section that I have the least to say about. You know, I just, about which I have the least to say. But that doesn't mean you can't improve it. You certainly can. Like you say, Ben, with practice, you can, hard work, practice, you can get a lot better at the reading comprehension. But yeah, I just think that Taylor is an especially good candidate for improving reading comprehension.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing here, not to belabor this point, but a lot of times people feel like reading comp is harder to improve, and so it becomes self-fulfilling. Like people don't really spend their time on it. Most people's scores are flipped, of course. They have -14 in games, and they have maybe -7 in reading comp, or even -2. And what happens is then they go after games, and they do games and games and games for weeks, and they don't really spend any time on reading comp. And then at some point, their games catches up to the reading comp and maybe even goes beyond it. Yeah. And they're in the habit of practicing games. And then they look at their reading comp and they go, oh, man, my reading comp score hasn't changed much, or if at all. And wow, there must just not be anything I can do about it. Well, no, you just haven't done anything about it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why it's where it's at. But if you had treated reading comp like you treat the games, I would be surprised if you didn't see improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at those 14 mistakes, you know, you're gonna find, and if you do another section, or, you know, do another test, do another test, do another test, you're gonna find that you're making systematic, just repeated mistakes of the exact same type on the questions. And I think if you sort those out, you're gonna just stop making those mistakes. There's one mistake that I'm almost certain Taylor is making.
Yes.
I thought maybe you'd predict it.
Oh, I thought it was an invitation to ask.
I'm trying to set you up. I'm not trying to set myself up.
I think I saw your reply to this, which makes a lot of sense. But it must be true, right? Was that your thought on this?
Well,
one?
that's my thought. Yeah, is that, you know, Taylor is clearly bright. She's used to figuring things out, right? She's used to being smart. She's used to figuring things out. On her first practice test, she got a 160, right? That's, you know, she's talented. And then there are those reading comprehension questions. I know I've talked about it on the show multiple times, but there are those reading comprehension questions that sound like which one of, you know, it can be inferred from the passage that the author would be most likely to agree with which one of the following. And on question stems like that, sometimes the highest performing students miss those questions because they feel like they're being invited to predict what the author would say next. Yeah. And then they end up picking answer choices that are just a step further than what's actually justified by the passage. So that would be my number one tip for Taylor is, like, look at your mistakes. If these are, treat them as if they were must be true questions. Treat them as if the question stem just said, which one of the following must be true based on the passage?
Yeah.
Or which one of the following did the passage say?
Yeah.
And if you look at your wrong answers and ask yourself, did the passage say this? I think you'll find that what you've done is you've picked answers that are speculative, that are like going the next step of, oh, I know what you're gonna say. But that's not what they're testing. They're testing your reading comprehension.
Yeah.
So your reading comprehension is just, hey, did you get the stuff that was actually on the page? And it's shockingly frequent that the correct answer will just be explicitly stated in the passage. So review your mistakes, obviously. And then I think you're going to see, if you got minus 14, it's almost impossible to get minus 14 without picking answers that are like more than what the passage actually said.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very excellent point, because people sometimes read too much into the word infer, like you're saying, and they think they have to find something new, and they're like, wait, this answer's too easy because it's already said here. The flip of that is you do have to be careful because, like you said, you can get an answer that must be true. So it's not explicitly stated, but it's something that, given what was explicitly stated, does absolutely 100% have to be true.
Yeah, if someone from the LSAC is listening, I would love to know why they do that. That question stem, it can be, you know, which one of the following can be inferred from the passage. They do this on logical reasoning, and they do it on reading comprehension. Can they just change those to it must be, which one of the following must be true? Because it's like, are you rewarding people for taking a fancy LSAT prep class? I feel like I'm getting unjustly enriched by that question stem. So, you know, I'm like talking myself out of business, I suppose, but it just seems stupid that they're going to have this question type or question stem that is so easily misinterpreted even by the highest performing students. So I just don't understand what they're doing. And then it's doubly worse when they do which one would the author be most likely to agree with. Because that's not really what they're going for either, right? They don't want you to predict. They want to know if you comprehended the passage as written, and very frequently the answer is going to be something that the author just said or necessarily implied.
Yeah.
But it's not like, oh, based on the type of person that I think this author is, I can imagine that they would also believe this. But the way the question is worded, it's just like, it doesn't make sense to me. If they're testing reading comprehension, then why would they have these like trappy kinds of questions? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I do have a small theory about that. I've thought about it in logical reasoning. The instances in which the correct answer was verbatim. I mean, I still get your broader point, but the instances in which the correct answer was verbatim seems like slim to none. Like it's restating what was said, but maybe the sentence uses like one different word or a slightly different word, and so in their mind, it's an inference from that sentence, even though it's essentially the same sentence.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I agree with you. The answer is not like a lot of times verbatim, but it's just synonyms. It means the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And if what they're testing is your comprehension, then I don't know why they would have a trappy kind of question like that. It's because I can't tell you how many students I've said this to, and then I just see the light bulb go on. They're like, oh, that's all they mean? And I'm like, yeah, that's all they mean. They just want to know if you comprehended what the author said.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they wanted me to like go on, fill in the blank, take the next. No, that's never what they're asking. So I really don't know why they put it to you that way, other than they want to reward people who had a fancy LSAT class. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it. So that's the ultimate goal, Ben, of the podcast, is we're gonna ruin our own careers. How about that?
That sounds like a good goal. I like it. I could go into gardening or something.
Like in episode 500, we're gonna not have jobs anymore.
People just like the listenership just keeps going down. It's like now it's 0.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. Question 2. Do you often see your students improve drastically in RC?
I do, yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's almost like it happens by osmosis. We study so much logical reasoning, and they get so good at logical reasoning, especially the must be true question type. And when you get really good at the must be trues in logical reasoning, you start getting all of the reading comprehension questions right as well.
Yeah.
So we don't spend very much time on RC in class, but we do a passage here and there. Same thing with my private tutoring students. We'll do a passage here and there. And even though we don't spend very much time on it, people do improve a lot. I mean, of course, the students are still doing reading comprehension in their practice tests and whatnot. They're always doing RC. But we don't talk about it a lot in class, and nevertheless, people can improve.
Yeah, a couple semesters ago, I put together a bunch of the hardest reading comp passages from the older tests because I wasn't really sure what to do with them.
Yep.
I felt like, hey, there's just a ton of reading comp out there, and sometimes people are saying, hey, should I read The Economist to improve my reading comp? And I'm thinking, there's all these old tests. Why don't we go and cherry pick the hardest ones and just say, have at it with these? Yeah. And so that's that book of 40, it turns out to be 40 reading comp passages from the older tests, has been pretty helpful. And I think it's also helped people realize, hey, look, there's like more you can do with this section. Like at least even if there's not as much to say about it in class, just doing it over and over again and starting to get a sense of what they're going to ask you, so that when you're reading the passage, you're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they're going to ask about this word that they just quoted because that's a weird word, and they love to ask about that sort of stuff. Can help you, as well.
Yeah. So the third question says, how would you suggest a self-study student practice reading comprehension with 3 months before the test? What are the best reading comprehension resources?
Well, actually, so for a self-study student, I would say contact me and I'll send you that book of reading comp passages, because it's old tests, so it's not going to overlap with the tests that you should be taking. And then I would say to definitely do blind review for the ones that you're not sure about in reading comp, because like you were saying earlier, the answer to almost all, if not all of the questions is somewhere in the passage. Well, I mean, to all of them, it's somewhere in the passage. It might be an inference, but it's somewhere in that passage. And if you can't figure it out, if you're not sure about that answer, maybe you couldn't be sure in time, but can you be sure now? Like, reread that passage with that one question in mind, and with that one answer choice, or the two answer choices you're debating in mind. You've got to be able to find it. At least force yourself to try, so that you can start doing it on your own before you know whether A is correct or D is correct.
Best reading comprehension resources, I think I would just, like you say, just do old reading comprehension passages. I don't know that there's not a book that I recommend in this situation. Do you recommend a book in this situation?
No. Nope.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my tips. With some of them we've talked about before, about reading sentences and being really clear about what it's saying and trying to anticipate where the author is going. I have been telling people a little bit more recently that I will often find myself reading a paragraph and then pausing for a half second. And it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that it's a paragraph necessarily. It's just that I will read a few sentences and then I'll stop, and I'll sometimes go back at that point and sort of, I'm reading a little bit of what I've already read to sort of clarify what I'm reading right now, because things in the reading comp passage connect to each other. What was said earlier connects to what was said later, and sometimes I'm reading through the passage and I'll be in the third paragraph and I'll pause for a half second and I'll go back up to the first paragraph and be like, wait a sec, they talked about this idea in this sentence, and I'll reread that sentence and then I'll draw a connection in my mind between those two ideas. It's like I'm pulling the passage together, whereas I think so many people are just reading moment to moment. You know, it's like, yeah, I get this tree, I get this tree, I get this tree, but they don't get the forest.
Right.
You have to get the trees to get the forest, but sometimes they just stop. They don't take that half second to sort of try to pull it all together. Yeah. And it makes the questions just so much easier, I feel like.
Yeah. So for resources, Taylor, we're just recommending do all the old tests, do all the old reading comprehension. That is it.